Good morning, everyone. Today we'll have the class regarding the brain and its different parts. We'll not go into much of the detail or too much into the dig into the detail. So we'll just superficially say what are the different parts of the brain. So we'll start with the brainstem. So now coming to the different views. So that is anterior, this is posterior, here is the superior, and this is inferior. If you see the skull, so this is how it correlates. Now we'll rotate the brainstem, and here we'll remove the nerves, and this is the brainstem, which is seen of three parts: medulla oblongata, the pons, and the midbrain. So the medulla oblongata is this one, the lower part of the brain. It is the most distal or the inferior part. It starts with the end of the pons, and this is where the spinal cord begins. So the spinal cord begins at the foramen magnum of the skull. So this is the medulla. Now here, this is the pons above the medulla, and above the pons here, you can see the midbrain. So if we isolate the brainstem, we can see the same structures here. So the pons, medulla, and midbrain. So this one, upper one is the midbrain. Here is anterior. So there we can see the cerebral peduncles. And posteriorly, if we have a look, we can see these hill-like structures, the four ones, isn't it? They are together called as the corpora quadrigemina. In Latin, basically, that is, we call it as quadruplets or four. So the first one, top one here, they are the superior colliculi, and the bottom here is the inferior colliculi. And colliculi means basically called hills in Latin. Just looks like hills, isn't it? Yes. And together here, they form the tectum of the midbrain, or the roof of the midbrain, whatever we call. So next, this entire thing is the midbrain, which is made up of cerebral peduncles, the tectum, where we can see the four colliculi. There are a lot of nuclei in the midbrain basically. So what are these nuclei? They are the collection of nerve cell bodies present in the central nervous system. What is ganglia? I earlier told you that it is a collection of the nerve cell bodies outside CNS, that is in peripheral nervous system. So here there are a lot of nuclei which controls the human body functions like blood pressure, respiration, the level of consciousness, the wakefulness, alertness, etc. And there are many cranial nerve nuclei also. So here you can see these cranial nerves, many of them arise from the brainstem. Now here, this is the cerebellum, parts of the brain which is seen behind the brainstem. It has the two lobes, the right and the left lobes. Cerebellum means little brain in Latin. It is seen behind the brainstem, below the cerebrum. Controls the muscle balance, isn't it? Voluntary movements. Now, if we remove the cerebrum and the cerebellum, here now we can see the brainstem, and this is the midbrain, which is identified by the colliculi. So this is the dorsal surface of the brainstem. Next, we'll talk about the diencephalon. So it sits at the top of the midbrain, where we have the thalamus, hypothalamus, and the pineal body. The pineal body, or the pineal gland, as you can see here. So if the cerebral hemispheres are removed, if we see the back of the brainstem or the colliculi, so here this is the pons and this is the medulla. So if we turn the brainstem here above this paired structure, which is spherical or oval. So they are called the thalamus or the thalami. There is the right and the left thalamus seen above the brainstem, isn't it? So in between there is the interthalamic adhesions between them, the connection between them. And below the thalamus is the hypothalamus. So this is the hypothalamus here in this region. So this is the oval shaped thalamus and this is the hypothalamus. Behind, can you see here? So this is called as the pineal gland. The thalamus is very important. It acts as a switchboard or a gateway. It relays the fibers to the cerebrum or from the cerebrum. That is the cerebral cortex if you take. It contains lot of nuclei. The thalamus sends and receives fibers from the through the cortex of the cerebrum, through the thalamocortical connections. So wakefulness, the sleep, information from the various sensory system and links to the basal ganglia, this is all related to this region. Now here, lateral view of the cerebrum. So here can you see the thalamus? Many fibers come here projecting from the midbrain, pons and medulla, and that projection to the cerebral cortex, and in reverse also we can see the fibers getting back to the thalamus. So that is why we call it as the relay station or the switchboard. This is about the thalamus. So next, cerebral hemispheres. So can you see these two cerebral hemispheres, the lobes, the right lobe and the left lobe? They are responsible for the higher functions, thinking, memory, consciousness, language, movement, sensory perceptions, etc. So this cerebral hemisphere consists of an outer cortex, which is mainly made up of 6 layers of the gray matter, and then the inner one is the white matter. So now let me rotate it. Yes, here you can see in the diagram, this is the cerebral cortex. Now let me cut it here. So this is the coronal section what we make. Once we slice the brain and have a look, this is how it appears, one half of it. So this coronal section, in this what can we see? So can you see the inner one? So this is the white matter. So here this is the gray matter outside. So it has the outer gray matter like this, which is folded on itself. So that is the cerebral cortex. And here it has the 6 layers of the neuronal tissue. What is this neocortex? It is a cortex where there are the 6 layers. And any other layers where there are less than 6 layers are called allocortex. And then there might be the archicortex, the paleocortex, isn't it? Less than 6 layers. So neocortex is the one where we can see the 6 layers. Which is the newer part of the cortex basically. Next one. Outer part of the cerebral hemispheres. Can you see these depressions or the grooves and the elevations? These elevations are called gyrus or the gyri, and the depressions or grooves are called sulcus. You can see plenty of the sulcus and gyrus. They have different names, but here today I'll just discuss only 2. So this is the central sulcus, which is very important, and here this is the lateral sulcus. So this is the central and the lateral sulcus. These 2 sulcus are used to separate the functionally important lobes of the cerebrum. So these to divide the brain into 4 lobes. basically. So first one, anterior to the central sulcus here. So in front of this central sulcus, whatever lobe is there, this one, this is the frontal lobe of the brain or the cerebrum. Next, behind or posterior to the central sulcus, this one, this is the parietal lobe, which is drawn in yellow. This is now the green one, this is the temporal sulcus, and below that will be the temporal lobe. This is related to the temporal bone of the skull. And behind, this is the occipital lobe in blue, which is related to the occipital bone. So each of these lobes are related to the corresponding bones, the frontal bone, parietal bone, the temporal bone, and the occipital bone. So now these are the four lobes: anteriorly frontal lobe, posteriorly the parietal lobe, and below the occipital lobe, and laterally there is the temporal lobe inferior to the lateral sulcus. The frontal lobe is important in decision making, planning. The temporal lobe, mainly it's in memory, language, hearing, etc. Parietal helps in integration basically. It has the information centers. And occipital lobe, which is seen here behind, it is responsible for vision. So this is about a general crude overview of the different lobes of the brain.